Hello, my name is Codemaster Jamal, and I'm an indie game developer. Welcome to the 11th devlog for my indie game, Virtual Monsters. If this is your first time tuning in, make sure to leave a like and hit the subscribe button at the end of the video. This week, I worked on the monster team system for my game. Monster teams are the tamer's party of monsters that a tamer travels alongside with in their journey through the virtual world and Junsei. Every tamer has the ability to carry a certain amount of monsters based on their license, but must also have the proper amount of storage available to store that monster on their team. I have been looking at the source code for a project called Pokemon Unity. It is basically someone's project for recreating Generation 4 of the Pokemon games. In Unity, I mainly looked at the source code to get some ideas on how I should implement similar systems into my own game. When I first started down this journey of creating an open world MMORPG, I looked at a few tutorials for how to make a Pokemon game in Unity. Needless to say that while I did learn a thing or two about making that type of game in Unity, most tutorials were cut short and the creator just simply put did not finish any of them. So I have been pretty much on my own for how I should make these systems work in my own game. That being said, I remember being in my C++ class in college and learning about arrays for the first time. Prior to taking that class, and with me being a self-taught programmer, I had come across arrays before, but I never really had a use for them. When I was taking my computer science classes in school, I always thought about how I could apply some of these things that they taught me to game design. That being said, when I came across arrays, my first thought was, oh, that's probably how they create a team of 6 Pokemon in the Pokemon games. The basic concept behind creating a party system, or in my case, a team of monsters, is to store all of the monsters' data on the team into an array and create functions to move or even delete some of these monsters. In the previous devlog, I mentioned that I stored monsters in a dictionary, and at first, this was a great idea until I noticed dictionaries can't be serialized in Unity. I needed a way to actually visibly see what I was storing inside these arrays, or in this case, dictionaries, so this idea wasn't too great for me. Now, there is a way to actually serialize dictionaries in Unity, but we'll get into that on another subject. I thought it was a great idea because you can control the index of the dictionary, but because I couldn't actually see what I was putting into each pair, I decided to go with lists. Fortunately, refactoring my code was pretty easy, as lists can use all of the same functions as dictionaries with a few minor differences. And with that, I could clearly see that what I was adding to the tamer's team was clones of the prefab, which worked perfect for me. The next thing was to create a method to give the players more monsters. So I did, and I created a second NPC to give monsters to the tamer, as long as the tamer had a starter monster, that is. With this, I can add as many monsters to the tamer as I need to test my game. I also don't know why, but whenever I set my NPC's NavMesh agent to not walkable, it allows the player to walk straight through them. Originally, this is what I wanted, as I didn't want NPCs in the game to be an obstacle for the player, unlike trees and interactable objects. I won't think about it too hard, but I'm just curious as to why this didn't work before. The NPCs are able to use their face target and unfaced target functions because of this. I won't question why this is, but for now, this is actually the effect I wanted to achieve, so I'll leave it alone for now. When monsters are added to the tamer's team, I deactivate the graphics and make them invisible to the player. In the inspector, you can see the colliders for their NavMesh is still active. As long as their NavMesh is active, monsters will still follow the tamer. I came across an issue where if the player switched to their monster as the leader, if one of the monsters that are invisible on the player's team collided with an NPC, it would run the interact function for that NPC, and the UI for the interaction would display on the screen, even though the leader monster was not within that collider. Puzzling, but fortunately I was able to solve this issue by checking if the game object that collided with the collider is the same game object as the actual monster that's leading the party. In another video, I want to touch up on switching the lead monster of the team with another monster on the team. For now, the difference between monsters added to the team and monsters added to the farm is that monsters added to the farm have their graphics deactivated and their game object itself deactivated. Doing this actually leaves the game object in the same place it was instantiated, but there are ways around this. For the most part, that monster is on your farm and will be accessible to you when it's needed. Currently, I'm not sure if this is the way I want to do monster farms because it seems like a cheap trick, but when I was testing the system, I started out by adding prefabs to the farm. However, when I checked the farm to see if it has the same monster, it wouldn't allow me to add more than one copy of that prefab to the farm, which is a big problem if the player has more than one copy of a monster. In the end, the feature works, and now the player can add monsters to their team or their farm. Originally, I had the idea to make multiple farms, but for now, since I'm a one-man team, I want to downsize on how much I need to do to actually complete this game. When I first started out, I was actually rather ambitious with my ideas, but as I've gone along, I've decided to kind of scale back on a few things for my game. Eventually, I do want farms to be a physical scene that players can go to train their monsters. I even thought about creating a game mode where players can customize their farms to their liking, but that would be for later down the road. Now, the way how monster teams work in terms of mechanics and actual gameplay is that every tamer starts off with one monster, and they can only handle one monster on their team until they get a license to handle more. You can always have as many monsters as you want on your farm, however, the amount of monsters you can have on your team will be determined by your tamer license. The better your license, the more monsters the player can add to their team. Ultimately, you can have no more than 10 monsters on a team at a time. You can obtain licenses by defeating Coliseum leaders and winning cup matches. That's the first mechanic behind it. The second mechanic is that while you are allowed to have up to 10 monsters on your team, the monsters on your team cannot exceed that tamer's maximum CPU. That is, the amount of data the tamer can handle. Every monster has a CPU, which is kind of like saying it has a file size. You can call it a cost or a weight if that makes more sense. Basically, every time a monster is added to the player's team, it adds to the overall CPU, and if the monster exceeds the amount of CPU, it cannot be added to the player's team. While low-rank monsters have low CPU, high-rank monsters have high CPU, making it difficult to add many high-rank monsters to a team. I got this idea originally from the game Neo Monsters, which is another game that inspired me to make my own in terms of mechanics. Even though it's a bit off topic, the only thing I did outside of work on the monster team this week was work on the virtual drive. Originally, I created a sprite for the virtual drive that wasn't too great. It looked terrible when it stretched, and when it wasn't stretched, certain parts of it were too pixelated. So I decided to redo the entire thing. Currently, I'm using it for the pause menu, which I plan on loading with a bunch of different options. The idea behind the virtual drive is that it works similar to a smartphone. That is, it can be loaded with different apps, and each of these apps have different functions. Right now, I'm working on the scanner and the VR Dexter apps. However, I think I will save this for another time. Perhaps next week I will work on making some new custom UI for my game. As the next step I want to take for monster teams is to add a HUD so you can see different monsters on your team. Well, I guess that'll be it for now. If you enjoyed watching the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell for more updates on virtual monsters. It's been great with you guys. Till next time, this is Codemaster Jamal, and I'm signing out.
Spitfire!
Season 2!